Okay. Right. That looks as if people have kind of stopped coming in. MDL's coming in. Sally and Katia will be. Thanks, Laura, for letting us know. It's all good for you. Will be letting us know. So I'm just going to hand over to Fiona Steele, who's the director of Action for Children. My nerves are getting the better of me. Is it Scotland?
Yep.
Fiona, I'll hand over
Yep.
to you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much, Donna. So welcome everyone. As Donna says, my name's Fiona Steele and I'm the National Director for Scotland at Action for Children. I don't direct all of Action for Children, just in Scotland, hopefully. And I'm really pleased that you can join us online today. At Action for Children, we have a vision that every child should have a safe and happy childhood and the foundations that they need to thrive. And today we are focusing on the safe element of that vision as we launch the Criminal Exploitation of Children framework for practice. First of all, a little bit of context, because at Action for Children, we've got a long established history of delivering services to young people in conflict with the law that are based on support, intervention and prevention. And we've found that children who most needed to be lifted out of trouble and adversity were the ones that are least likely to receive that effective help and support. And that was especially true as we saw young lives were being lost and destroyed by criminal exploitation. And criminal exploitation is a complex type of child abuse where a young person is manipulated or pressured to take part in the criminal activity. And we, over 10 years ago, pioneered a support service that is now called Action for Children's Criminal Exploitation Intervention Service for Children and Young People. And those services support young people aged 12 to 18, considered to be the hardest, well, I don't like saying hardest to reach, but the most, traditionally have been the most difficult to engage, who are currently involved in or on the periphery of criminal exploitation. You're going to hear more about what all that means. But our services work in partnership with a range of sectors from health, education, social work, police and other third sector organisations. And by using a long-term multi-agency approach and intelligence-led targeting, we identified barriers and patterns of behaviour affecting children to establish ways to combat these and reduce exploitation. And our intention is to assist young people to gain positive direction in their lives, recognising small steps and achievements. It is the issue of partnerships and collaboration that's crucial, which is why it's so great to have everyone on the call today. And the partnership approach is something I'm really proud of in Action for Children, and it's something we want to support and continue to promote. But over the last 5 years, as part of the Scottish Government's Serious and Organised Crime Task Force, and in particular the Divert subgroup, professionals and practitioners working with children and young people have repeatedly highlighted the issue of criminal exploitation and the lack of related guidance and consistent practice across Scotland. And while looking for a partner to help tackle this issue, we could only really have gone with one, and that is the Children and Young People Centre for Justice, CYCJ. So over the years, we've had a great long-term relationship with CYCJ, and we've undertook internationally groundbreaking work that supported improvement in youth and criminal justice, contributing to better lives for individuals and communities. And so here we are working again together on this journey. So back in March 2023, we jointly received funding from the Cora Foundation, which we are very grateful for, via the Promise Partnership to develop an evidence-based strategic response and national policy position on the criminal exploitation of children. And really, I suppose, relating that back to the promise, one of the key things is about systems change, and you'll hear a bit more about how we've tried to impact on those systems as well, I'm sure, from Sharon. But one of the key focus areas was to address gaps in knowledge and inconsistent application of legislation and guidance that could relate to the criminal exploitation of children, making a tool for practitioners that was accessible, easy to use and complemented their existing work, and that tool brought with it some of that lived experience from our young people, children, young people. What were they telling us that practitioners needed to know? that's the framework, and we're going to go into more detail of that during the course of the webinar, and it offers practical resources for agencies involved in directly supporting children and young people at risk or who have experience of criminal exploitation, and of course, importantly, the tools to recognise when that's happening. And the framework was designed in collaboration and in partnership with children and families who had experienced exploitation, and it's aimed at practitioners across all organisations. So I really do hope you'll find it of great value and a tangible and practical tool. We want it to be a living document that people use every day, not something that gathers dust on a bookshelf or left in a folder, etc. And to make sure it comes to life today, I'm really thankful that we've got the passionate list of the passionate presenters that we have. So we're going to hear from Sharon McIver, our very own Director of Child Criminal Exploitation at Action for Children, alongside Donna. Donna McEwan, who's a Practice Development Advisor of CYCJ, and between them they're going to be providing an overview of the framework. And then we're also going to hear from Holly Bird, who's a researcher at CYCJ, and she's going to give us a run through the evaluation of the framework. Lastly, but not least, Joanna Lee, a Practice Development Advisor at CYCJ, is going to outline the e-learning opportunities that come with the framework. And after we hear from other presenters, we've set some time aside for questions as well, and we're happy to take those. So with that in mind, I think it's over to Sharon and Donna, and if you just want to pass seamlessly on to the next person once you've done your presentation, and I'll pick up questions at the end. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Fiona. Are you able to share the slides, Joanne, if you don't mind?
Everybody see them?
Yeah, that's perfect. And if you could just skip on, I think, a couple of slides. The next one just details what we're going to cover across the next kind of half an hour or so. Thank you. So I suppose, oh, sorry, if you go back one. Great, thanks. So I suppose just to start, and this reiterates a lot of what Fiona has mentioned in our introduction, this work has been, I guess fair to say, from the perspective of myself and Donna, who have worked really closely over the last 6 years to think about the response to children who are criminally exploited. And kind of back 6 years ago, when we started on the Divert subgroup, a lot of that focus was around awareness raising. And at that time, we really needed to think about how we could upskill practitioners and raising awareness in terms of identifying criminal exploitation, what were the vulnerabilities, what were the indicators, really important work. But over the years since then, what's become quite clear is that, well, what next? What do we do once we've identified criminal exploitation? And what was quite evident when we continued engagement with different agencies, practitioners in this space was we're dealing with a really complex issue. We're dealing with children who are groomed, coerced, manipulated into criminal activity. And we recognise, and most agencies will recognise, that these children are the victims of child abuse. But within that, they are also in conflict with the law. And that's quite a complex dilemma for us to try to deal with. And there needs to be clarity within the system about how to respond to that. So this framework kind of seeks to address those issues, I suppose. And what we really wanted to do with the framework, as Fiona said, is not just develop yet another framework, but develop a framework that actually takes account of all existing policy and legislation, what exists in practice currently across various documents, and pull that together into a streamlined framework that helps practitioners navigate their way through the challenges within the system. Could you go on to the next slide, please? So what we hope it will offer is clear guidance around roles, responsibilities, and the expectations of services, that complex dilemma that I talked about, whether a child should be seen as a victim first and foremost, or whether we need to tackle the risk element relating to their involvement in criminal activity, the roles, responsibility, and expectations of services working together across this issue is quite clearly laid out in the framework. But within that, we constantly acknowledge the challenge that's faced by agencies and within different agencies, and how that can impact children and young people who are criminally exploited. When we developed the framework, we were consulting with children and young people and their families that we support and asking them how they experience the system and what they needed from agencies. So again, that will be threaded through the framework as well. And of course, what we really tried to do was offer kind of clear, succinct suggestions around working practices within and between agencies, not trying to suggest anything particularly new, but how do we kind of tweak and adapt existing practice to make sure we consider the nuances of criminal exploitation. As we go through the next kind of few slides, if you're able to move on to the next slide, please. What we'll talk about is the kind of key themes or the key sections of the toolkit and how we've tried to structure this. So the first section that you'll come across when you look at the framework, you'll go through a bit of a background about what criminal exploitation is and the context for Scotland. And then we move into the kind of first section, which is around raising awareness and identifying criminal exploitation. What we've tried to do through each section is make sure that we have a guide for practitioners that not only just offers kind of individual suggestions for practice, but also for agencies, but the multi-agency partnership as well. If you could go on to the next slide. So you'll see that the kind of pictures that we've got on the slides are direct examples taken from the framework. So you'll see that there is some suggestions for individual practice, but there's some suggestions within there for local partnerships and individual agencies to consider. Because what we absolutely know in tackling the criminal exploitation of children is this isn't just one agency's responsibility, and this framework should never just be seen as one individual's responsibility to support a child. It's a collective responsibility. Next slide, please. And the kind of final bits that we'll look at, or you'll notice within the framework, is that we try and summarise each section to have key knowledge points. So it's an accessible tool where practitioners, if they might be writing an assessment or they might be seeking to have a professional conversation at a multi-agency meeting, that they can go to the relevant knowledge point sections relating to whether the different parts of the framework to support them in having those conversations or within those assessments. I'll hand over to Donna, who is going to talk through a bit more of the detail of the other sections.
That's great. Thanks, Sharon. So within the framework, we had an idea as well that we wanted to create resources or materials that professionals and practitioners could use to support their practice. So it's really important that, as Fiona highlighted, this is going to be a dynamic document that will add on the resources and materials as we develop them. But we developed two tools. So the first tool that I just want to touch on is the screening tool that we developed. And it's very much comes from that linking in with contextual safeguarding practice. It's about looking at the different contexts, relationships, and situations in which to help practitioners identify where they think criminal exploitation may actually be happening or where they think there's a risk of it happening. It's very much about helping pull information together. How often do we hear that different parts of the system hold different parts of the information, and different parts of the system perhaps look at the information with a slightly different lens? What we've heard from delivering training around the screening tool and around the framework is that people have found this a very helpful tool, that it helps pull everything together into one place. It is not a checklist. This is about using your professional judgment. It is about considering what it means in the context of individual children within their support networks and the places and spaces and relationships in which they have. It helps you rule in or rule out criminal exploitation based on what you know at that time, but it's also really helpful in terms of thinking about those shades of grey where you think there might be something going on, but you maybe don't have concrete evidence. So it's about making sure you record that and note it, and it helps you identify, well, what other information do I need to help me make a more concrete decision. It's also about helping you think, what is the type of harm we're really concerned about, and what is the likely impact of that harm? And it considers from the child's perspective, so from risk of harm to the child from others, as well as from aspects of the child's behaviour to other people. This is not a standalone tool. It should contribute to your overall assessment with children and young people and families, and also it should then help pull through and develop your interventions and your safety planning and strategies that you need to put in place to help keep that child safe as well, and other people as well. Okay. If you want to move on to the next one. Thank you. So Sharon mentioned really the strength of this framework will be in the multi-agency working. We know that different roles and responsibilities, and that some agencies and some roles will have a more direct or involved relationship and working relationship with children and young people. But across the whole landscape, from Crown Office, police, social work, third sector, children's panel members, reporters, safeguarding professionals, everybody and anybody who may come into contact with a child, it's really important that they recognise their role in keeping children safe. This is about getting it right for every child, and it's about protecting children. The benefit to this multi-agency working is about making sure that we share the skills and knowledge, and that helps us consider where criminal exploitation may be happening or is at risk of happening from various different perspectives, and brings it all together. It recognises the tensions between organisations and our different agendas, but ultimately we're all trying to get to the same goal, to keep children safe and to keep communities safe, and for children to reach their potentials. If you want to move on to the next one, Joanne. Okay. So in terms of assessment and analysis, this is not a brand new way of working. It's utilising the skills and knowledge that we already contain across the workforce, and a very skilled and able workforce in terms of understanding the needs of children and young people and their families. So what the framework tries to do is to help you apply that and recognise what that means in terms of criminal exploitation, and about making sure that we're responding to the child as a child first, while also making sure that we respond to the potential harms from whatever direction they come from. If you want to move on to the next one. Oh, sorry, my wee speech bubble has come up too quickly. Thank you. So in terms of in Scotland, we already have a number of policies, legislation, and protocols that are there to support and protect children. Primarily in terms of criminal exploitation, we're thinking about the Human Trafficking and Exploitation Act 2015 and the Lord Advocate's instructions on the presumptions against prosecution for victims of trafficking or exploitation. It's really important that we don't just know these things are out there, but it's actually how we integrate that into shaping our practice. For example, the Lord Advocate's instructions is quite clear that any under 18 reported to Procurator Fiscal, then it should be considered as exploitation involved, or could it be a factor in their offending behaviour. And it's also about thinking, and it's not about minimising offending behaviour or the harm that may come from it, but it's about understanding what might be driving that. And given that we know, and it's stated, children cannot consent to their own exploitation, but yet we will then hold them responsible for the offences that happen either as a cause or a consequence of their offending behaviour. So it's really important that we understand what is out there and how we use that legislation and guidance to protect our children. Make sure that there's accountability, but also, if you want to bring the speech bubble up, how we hold those that either seek to or are exploiting our children responsible. Quite often and continually, we are focusing on children and young people, we're putting the emphasis on them and holding them responsible for their involvement in criminal exploitation. We need to shift the lens. One of the main core aspects and principles of this framework is to strengthen that shift in focusing on how we disrupt and how we hold people accountable for the child abuse, which is criminal exploitation as well. Okay, if you want to move on. The second tool that we developed that's there within the framework is a multi-agency self-assessment, as it says in the slide there. This is really to help partnerships look at where they're at in terms of how do they respond, how do they keep children safe where there's a concern around criminal exploitation, what other strategies, protocols, frameworks do they have in place, and how can this integrate into it? This is not about blame or saying that people are not doing this or that. This is about taking stock and looking at how do we develop this, how do we support each other, and where are the areas that we need to focus on in order to make sure that children are not being criminally exploited moving forward. And I think that's me, and I'm going to hand over to Holly.
Thanks, Donna. I'm going to try and give like a super speedy run through of the mini evaluation we did of the framework and toolkit. So we were kind of asking people about their thoughts on the toolkit, as well as kind of some questions about their experience as professionals tackling the criminal exploitation of children. So the evaluation was based on data we gathered from a couple of different sources. We did some one-to-one interviews with practitioners. We distributed a survey and also used feedback that had been collected immediately after training sessions. And we kind of analysed all of this together. So next slide, please, Joanne. So the first theme, training, resources and support in the workplace. One of the things we asked was kind of how well supported practitioners felt kind of across these themes. Most people said they felt fairly or very well equipped when it came to training and workplace support, but slightly fewer respondents felt that they actually had sufficient resources to deal with the problem. And some of the other kind of feedback that came up around this theme included people wanting follow-up training sessions to reinforce previous learning. Some people felt that kind of, even though their kind of managers and colleagues were providing a lot of support, there was a lack of kind of community-based intensive support, and that kind of staff numbers were low. And also on the topic of staff, some people commented that statutory services appeared to be struggling to cope with increased number of referrals, which kind of had a knock-on effect on other services. Next slide, please, Joanne. So we also kind of asked what policies or procedures people are following when they're working with a criminally exploited child or young person. And we got a really, really wide range of answers here, people listing lots of different policies, processes, guidance, legislation. And although most people kind of felt they had quite a strong understanding of criminal exploitation of children as an issue, they were kind of less confident when it came to understanding kind of current policies and practice around that. There were kind of mixed views on the effectiveness of existing policies. Some people felt there were certain limitations or they're too vague, and others just kind of felt that further training was needed to understand them. I don't have time to go into like various kind of opinions and different criticism in depth, but some kind of comments on existing policies and procedures included some people felt that children were still being seen as criminals rather than victims in some contexts. Some people felt that kind of the reporting process wasn't clear enough, or felt that even when concerns are kind of escalated, there's not always the kind of action desired. Some people felt that partner agencies didn't always take on a kind of fair share of responsibility, or it was kind of difficult to work with different agencies if people weren't kind of all on the same page about the issue. And then some people kind of felt that they didn't have the time or capacity to update their own knowledge, or to be able to kind of build trusting relationships with young people and families. Again, the actual evaluation report kind of goes into a bit more detail on this. There was also kind of support for the introduction of a legal definition of criminal exploitation of children. So One person, for example, said that the lack of legal definition created a big deficit which prevents everybody from being joined up in their approach, because it's different bits of legislation in different areas that people will kind of pick and choose based on what they need to use. Next slide, please. So another issue that's kind of raised through the evaluation was the issue of language and stereotyping as an obstacle to dealing with the criminal exploitation of children. There's also kind of criticism of this a sort of like one-size-fits-all approach. So, for example, one person said, "It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's not a one-solution answer. I think what's needed is a tailored approach for every young person, depending on their circumstances and situation. So we have to be quite creative and flexible in terms of our thinking." And then another issue that people kind of commented on around this theme was actually kind of keeping up with children and young people in relation to kind of culture and technology, and being able to understand young people and their behaviour through that lens. Next slide, please. So in terms of kind of trends and narratives relating to the criminal exploitation of children, people felt that the narrative is actually moving in the right direction, in that people both like within their own organisation and out with had more awareness and acceptance of the idea that criminal exploitation of children should be dealt with through a child welfare lens, as in like responding to a child as a victim of exploitation rather than a criminal justice lens, responding to the child as a criminal or perpetrator, with blame directed at an adult exploiter rather than an exploited child. People also said that the knowledge base of their staff and colleagues had increased around this issue, and that people are better able to recognise possible signs of exploitation and to pass this information on. But despite that, some people said that even though things are kind of moving in the right direction, progress is slow, and increased awareness and understanding didn't always necessarily lead to changes on the ground. And others kind of highlighted a lack of consistency across agencies when dealing with the problem. The impact of financial cuts to children's services was also raised. And then in terms of kind of patterns and trends in the nature and volume of exploitation, some people notice, or most people notice, an increase in the number of children being exploited, as well as an increase in numbers of very young children being identified as at risk or being involved in exploitation. So a general kind of increase in numbers, frequency, and severity was highlighted. Next slide, please. So we also kind of asked more specific feedback about the toolkit and the training in terms of kind of improving people's knowledge and understanding of the issue, and kind of practical guidance and support to identify and respond to the issue. So most people really liked the toolkit and framework. People didn't think there was anything in particular missing in terms of content, but basically what came through was people wanting kind of more training on kind of using the toolkit, and people had like various other suggestions about, for example, kind of adding signpost extra support, things like that. Other feedback included people saying that the toolkit had been useful when speaking with lawyers for young people, and people said practitioners can add information to it and have it as a working document for assessment. Next slide, please. So the language within the toolkit was seen as accessible, easy to digest, and current. One of the people we spoke to for feedback in interviews said, rolling out the toolkit and the framework and the information within it helps people understand there's a kind of continuum of stages of exploitation. It really helps people to understand the indicators, and that we need to have a cohesive approach to tackling criminal exploitation of children. And people who attended a training session felt that it helped them to understand how to use the toolkit. So someone said the walkthrough of the material was helpful in supporting knowledge development, and another said that the training sessions gave practical advice and really pinpointed some areas we could improve on. People said they'd be interested in more training on the toolkit and on the kind of topic of exploitation more generally. So this has been a very quick summary of the evaluation. If you're interested and you want more kind of detail in terms of what practitioners were saying about their experiences of dealing with criminal exploitation, the actual evaluation report will be available, I think, probably on Action for Children and CYCJ websites, but stay tuned. Yeah, thank you for listening. Oh, I didn't say who I was passing on to.
Okay. Thanks, Ollie. I'll take over now. Sorry, make sure this is signed up. Hi, everyone. I'm going to speak to you about the e-learning platform in general, and also the launch of our very first e-learning module for criminal exploitation with my colleague Marianiki Vlachou, who is the main content creator for our e-learning module, and she's going to give you a sneak peek as to what to expect for the module and how it looks. So the launch of the CEC module, e-learning module, marks the launch of our e-learning platform. This is the first instance of learning that we're bringing to you, and we hope to be bringing more to you later on in the year. We have been developing the platform these last few months in partnership with the University of Strathclyde's Centre for Lifelong Learning, who host the platform and provide very helpful administrative and technological assistance, such as creating logins for our learners, deal with fees and general admin. It's the ambition of CYCJ to provide a suite of e-learning modules that include topics that are relevant to those professionals responding to children in conflict with the law. So you will see over the next few months us bringing to you a number of different modules that relate to those topics. All of the modules that we are designing are awareness-raising modules, and the learning within them seeks to support the sharpening of skills for professionals, reflective practice, and an increase in confidence and knowledge. The content is suitable for roles, but not exclusive to social workers from children and families, youth justice, residential workers, third sector organisations, health, education, police, and panel members. We are approximating each module to take you around 4 hours to complete. Each module is broken down into bite-sized chunks though, which means you can undertake the learning at your leisure and at a pace that's suitable for you. But please note, each module does give you does provide you with a number of references and reading material and reading resources. You'll be provided with this material in a downloadable format for you to take away, but that additional reading isn't included in the 4 hours that we've approximated for you to undertake the interactive learning. The cost attached to the module is £30 per learner per module, and that covers the administration costs, the technology costs, and the partners' fees that are incurred. Each module has various interactive elements, which we're going to show you a little sneak peek of what to expect, but you should expect to see things like guided reading, knowledge checks, short videos, matching activities, reflective exercises, along with real-world case studies. So our first module that we're very excited to be introducing for the launch of our platform is the criminal exploitation of children, and that's been developed by Donna and Sharon. So some of the key learning features from the module include deepening understanding of the nature of criminal exploitation of children, identifying indicators of exploitation, using a case study to consider ways to respond to exploitation of children, understanding how law and policy can be applied in practice to respond to the exploitation of children. So I'm going to hand you over to Marianiki, who is going to talk you through a couple of slides to showcase some of our elements on our module.
Thank you, Joanne, and I will hand over to a virtual Sharon that will talk you through the intro of the course. So As Joanne said, we designed the course in a way that it is user-friendly, so it has a variety of elements. It comes in learning blocks, and these have text, but it also have interactive learning graphics like this one that you can see. There are wee boxes where you can see what is needed in each course. There are knowledge checks that are either closed or they are open for reflection. There are case studies that you can track throughout the course. And also you can get our workbook. So our workbook comes as an attachment. So this is something that you can download and you can use it to capture your thoughts and reflections across the different exercises and checkpoints throughout the course. And it also has all the material, so the list of the references and the additional resources. So this is a version that you can download and keep after you have completed the course. And now back to Joanne.
That gives you a wee flavour of what to expect and some of the elements that make the module a little bit more interactive. So I want to give you a wee bit of information about the pilot of the module, which took place earlier this month. We managed to recruit some volunteers from the Youth Justice Conference and from a number of different people that have been interested in this topic and learning more. So we recruited some volunteers from across the sector, and as you'll see on the slide there, we had representation from various roles in different organisations in different positions from across the sector who were looking to increase their knowledge and awareness on criminal exploitation of children. We received some really valuable and appreciated feedback about the module. Some of that feedback informed how we were shaping this module and formed the introduction of the workbook that Marianiki's just showed you. So it was really good to hear from people about how we could improve, and we are really interested to continue to work on that and hear feedback from our learners. We wanted to capture as many perspectives as possible from professionals across the sector, and I've noted just some of the comments noted there also on this slide, and I've also put some more comments on the next slide. See there, someone said it was one of the best e-learning modules for criminal exploitation of children that's available. And also there are some additional comments that came from the pilot about people found it really helpful to be informed through different ways of learning, and also that there was some feedback regarding how it was very accessible for different stages of everyone's sort of background and knowledge of criminal exploitation. So whether you're a beginner and you know very little, or whether you actually know quite a bit, our learners felt that they took something away from it. Overall, the general feedback was that this module was a high quality piece of learning, which was suitable and accessible for various roles across the sector. So the module is live today. It's officially, it's been piloted, we've amended it, and we're very happy to be posting it live on our MyPlace Centre for Lifelong Learning, University of Strathclyde platform. So I've put a slide on the screen there for the QR codes, which will take you to the enrolment page where you can book your place. And also Sally is going to place a link in the chat to our e-learning page for some more information about what is coming next for our platform. So on that note, we will be releasing our next module next month, which is formulation, which has been developed by the Risk Management Authority, and later this year you can expect to see Preventing Online Harm and Sexual Exploitation, developed by the Lucy Faithfull Foundation, Unnecessary Criminalisation of Children in Residential Care, which has been developed by CYCJ and Care Visions, and also Speech, Language and Communication Needs with Jan Green, Speech, Language and Communication Needs expert. We will have more modules to follow after that, so please keep up to date via our e-bulletin, our webpage and our socials. And thank you for listening. I'm going to pass back to Fiona now for the question and answer.
Okay, thanks very much to all our speakers. I think that's been really informative, and you've given us a little peek into what the resources look like and how the actual learning platform is going to run. And I think the benefit of, you know, when we entered into this work, we really wanted it to be a resource that people could use, and like the actual platform that it's on will enable that, and also enable any updates and changes through legislation. So it's quite important for the toolkit. That's part of it being a living process and document, as it is hosted on that platform, and that, you know, I guess that kind of professionalizes it and will ensure that we update it as we go, and not just leave it on the shelf